Welcome to NewsHour's continued live stream coverage. I'm Hari Srinivasan. I'm joined by historians Michael Beschloss and Richard Norton Smith. So this is the calm before the storm. You two gentlemen are going to be on the set downstairs throughout the evening for your insight and analysis. What's at stake at this election?
Oh gosh. Well, you know, it's interesting. Everyone's going to be focused, obviously, on the race for the White House. Understandably, I actually am as interested in the congressional and down ballot races, and particularly the Senate, because I think, in addition to being characteristically a referendum on the incumbent in terms of the presidential race, the sort of untold story of this election may be that it's also a referendum on the modern Republican Party. And this is the second election cycle in a row in which the GOP expected to take over the Senate. The numbers favored them, and they may do it. But if they don't, it will raise some really interesting questions about the future of the party. And so that's one thing I'm going to be watching.
Okay. Michael?
I'd say sort of contrast this with 1976 when Gerald Ford was running against Jimmy Carter. Hard-fought campaign. Carter barely won. Turns out that if you look at what they said and did, they disagreed about extremely little, although they were nominees of opposing parties. And as Richard knows, later on, after they were both president, they had probably the closest relationship between ex-presidents that we've ever seen. So come all the way up to 2012, whatever you may say about this race between Obama and Romney, these are people who disagree on very fundamental issues of domestic, economic, foreign policy. And if there is a verdict on one side or the other that's in any way decisive, we're learning something about America.
Well, what's also interesting in the last few days, I've kind of thought about this, but is how the running for and the presidency itself changes the man, and it has been a man so far. So the person who comes into office, what are some of those challenges that they are confronted with that they just say, you know what, this is going to give me a gray hair, and sure enough.
Well, I think, I'm sure Michael's got his own response to that. I would just say, we're all taught in Civics 101 to think of the president as the most powerful man in the world, and there are instances where that is the case. But I'm constantly struck at the limitations on a president's power. First of all, a president often is judged by dealing with the unexpected. George W. Bush, classically, whether it was 9/11 or the financial collapse toward the end of his presidency, and I think that applies in varying degrees to most presidents. And so it's how you deal with the unexpected. And I don't know. What do you think?
I would say powerless in terms of, one of the things that the founders really worried about when they were writing that Constitution was make sure that the president does not have too much power.
Doesn't turn into a king.
In certain ways, they succeeded extremely well. If you look at the difficulty that a president will have, President Obama has had the last couple of years dealing with Congress that's dominated by an opposition party. Same thing with George W. Bush during his last 2 years, had a much harder time. So I think in a way, what we're missing that's taken place again and again over the whole of American history is a case where, sort of like 1961, John Kennedy went to Congress and said to Republicans, I want to go to the moon. It's going to cost $20 billion, a lot of money in those days.
Sure.
I know you think it'll unbalance the budget, but this is a matter of basic national security. The Republicans were swayed enough by that they did it.
So,
well, no, I was going to say, it's interesting. The presidents are changed. They're challenged. They're tested. John Kennedy's a classic example because of the assassination. In some ways, the way we look at him historically has seesawed back and forth. He was deified, and then a lot of historians tended to almost dismiss the historical significance of his presidency. In fact, if you look, Kennedy entered office a fairly conventional Cold Warrior. I mean, the differences between he and Richard Nixon were really insignificant in 1960. That was a consensus election. And he was also, quite frankly, a very reluctant warrior on the civil rights front. Before he died, having experienced the height of the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis, he had become a convert. Famously, the American University speech in June 1963, which foreshadowed arms control, a nuclear testbed treaty. But that same week, when George Wallace stood in the schoolhouse door in Alabama, Kennedy realized he could no longer evade his moral responsibilities as president. And so the notion that we all have that presidents grow in office is not universally true.
Nixon shrank, Harding, James Buchanan, I think all shrank.
Yeah, I'm not sure Harding could shrink too much beyond.
Okay, so I know you guys can get into a level of detail on the broadcast and here, but very quickly I want to ask, why do Americans care about the presidency? Why is this race so important that people are willing to spend $1 billion to get to the White House?
Well, one reason is that these people are celebrities, and we're fascinated by the horse race aspect of it. But more fundamentally is a good thing, and I think that is that anyone who might have said, let's say in the year 2000, doesn't matter who's president, doesn't affect my life, you look back at the last 12 years, it matters an awful lot, who was president during the first 8 years of that decade, whether Barack Obama or John McCain was president the last 4 years. So I think people have enough of a sense of that they don't want to allow their lives to be governed by other people.
Yeah, and I think, again, I'm picking up on what Michael said, if you look back over the last 20 or 30 years, think how many of those presidents, right or left, Republican or Democrat, were seen to be polarizing figures at the time. There are a number of factors contributing to that, but clearly, people care, they care passionately, and they're divided as much as they are united by whoever occupies the Oval Office.
All right, Richard Norton Smith, Michael Beschloss, you can catch them on the broadcast from 7 o'clock till, I don't know, hopefully midnight or less.
Hours.
And in the meantime, stay with us on our live stream. We'll have more interviews here. Thank you for joining us. I'm Hari Srinivasan.